Will Florida State finally sign a big-time offensive line class out of the high school ranks?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into another episode of Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you to the everydayers that make this a great show. I am looking forward to talking some recruiting today, and today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Make every day more with Gametime, because today you get the opportunity to download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Today's show, we are going to focus on not just recruiting, but offensive line recruiting. It has been something that I have discussed on this show ad nauseum since I began doing this show last August. It is something that Florida State has to do better. And going by the tea leaves, it is early, I understand. The class of 2025 at least has a chance to be a big-time offensive line class for Florida State, not out of the portal, from the high school ranks. If you take nothing else from this show, note that I am tired of hearing about Florida State trying to mix and match high school kids, transfers, etc., to make an offensive line. If you're going to be a consistent football program, period, you need to be able to recruit at every position at a high level. For whatever reason, Florida State, especially right before Jimbo left, it started in this trend and then it just continued on thereafter. There hasn't been a consistent level of offensive line recruiting, and maybe even worse, consistent level of development, because kids either got injured, kids transferred, kids didn't develop, whether that was coaching, whether that was their fault, or a combination. Whatever the reason, Florida State has had to rely on transfers far too often. Now, it's worked out for the most part the last year or so, but it did hinder Florida State, say 2018 to 2021. Anywhere in there, you could probably say in any given year, the offensive line cost Florida State at least one game. Well, the 25 class looks like it's going to change. So let's dive right in and talk about some of these kids. I'm going to define who they are based on what I've seen of them, some of my conversations with them, and what I think they can do long term. It's not any one particular player. It's about signing a group. Think of it this way. Offensive line, there's 5 guys up front. They're all trying to do the same thing. First guy is somebody that I'm going to talk about because I've seen him play several times. I know him well. He trains with a friend of mine, and that's Ziyare Addison. I've talked about him a little bit on this show, but he recently went to Under Armour in Orlando, got MVP. He's an offensive tackle, 6'5", 275, 280, somewhere in that range. He recently put up a video on his Twitter feed of him dunking a basketball. He does it pretty easy. When big guys can jump like that, when they're explosive, it's a good sign. I've got bunches and bunches of his video from seeing him play live and seeing him from my buddy sending me videos. This is a kid I probably know about as well as anybody in the class of 25. He lives just south of Tampa, on the edge of Tampa on 41 and 301. So I think that at Sumner High School, he's playing against pretty good competition. He's getting better from being there. But more than anything else, Ziyare is a kid that played defensive line and was a basketball player coming up. He made the transition somewhere around the end of his freshman year, early sophomore, can't remember exactly which, but quick feet, athleticism, etc., have made him a player that schools from across the country want. Miami, Alabama, Georgia, Florida State, Florida, you name it, they've all offered in some capacity within the last year, if not before. And he's a guy that's been pretty receptive to being open-minded about where he goes. He's got a really good relationship with the FSU staff, including Norvell, which that's something I'm seeing more and more of. Not that Norvell wasn't involved to begin with. Just a quick note, he's doing a really good job with the social media and all the things that the recruits like. Fair or not, like it or not, if you do not cater to these young men and their social media and all that, you're not going to get many of them. So Ziyare is a pretty level-headed kid, but it still doesn't hurt. Does pictures, seems to be very happy. He loves the process of being involved with recruiting. Norvell is going to help his own cause and the Florida State cause overall by doing that. I think Ziyare is a top 150 kid, maybe top 100, depends. Need to see him this year. It's harder to grade O-line because you don't get to see him in a camp setting and actually run block. Just can't do it. So I just get to see the pass pro. Is he perfect? No, but he is really good, and he's just so darn athletic. I've asked opinions of several other people, including John Garcia Jr., the guy that is a national recruiting analyst for Rivals and covers the Southeast, lives in Florida. He thinks Ziyare has a tremendous ceiling, may even be higher on him than I am. And we both agree that it's the quick feet. That's a big deal because if you're going to play tackle, especially left tackle, you've got to have elite feet. And this is a kid that's played basketball. He's been a defensive lineman before he moved over to the offensive side of the football. And I think the best days ahead are for him because he's only played it for a couple of years. The ceiling is, as they say, rather high. Next up on the list is somebody I just want to talk about because even though he's committed, I don't think it's fair to leave him out of this, and that's Solomon Thomas. He's from Raines High School in Jacksonville, might be the best interior offensive line recruit in the country. I've talked about him on this show many times. I'm just going to graze over this, but committed to the Noles, 6'4", 310, road grader, could play tackle, hypothetically. But Solomon told me the last time I was around him at Under Armour Orlando that he prefers inside. Take it for what it's worth. He enjoys the pounding, the physical presence that you have to carry to go against defensive linemen on the interior. Fair enough. That's what you want to do. Go for it. And he's strong enough to do it. He's a bear. There's a play that he completely stoned one of the guys in front of him on the defensive line in one-on-ones and didn't let him off the line of scrimmage in a pass block drill. Not run, pass block drill. That's pretty impressive because you don't see that very often, even if you're in pads and it's easier to get a hold of somebody. He did it with a kid just having a normal basic shirt on. That's impressive to me. And he can get out in space on a screen or a toss sweep, whatever, and lead the way. Tremendous athlete. Next up on the list is a kid that I think that many people are probably going to put up on their list pretty high when all said and is done for these classes. That's Mario Nash Jr. Now, keep in mind, this current Florida State staff, many of them have history in Memphis with Norvell, or they've coached somewhere in that area, the Memphis, Tennessee area, in Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, whatever. They've got recruiting background somewhere in through there. This kid's from Kemper County High School in Mississippi. It's DeKalb, wherever DeKalb, Mississippi is. I have no idea. That is a massive state with a lot of schools that'll have like one or two kids at each one. Makes it difficult kind of to cover. Well, he came all the way from Mississippi and went up to Georgia for the Under Armour event. And Nash was one of those guys that really impressed. I thought he was the best pure tackle there amongst numerous. There are kids that have Georgia offers and all this stuff rated higher before. I would take Nash above anybody. He got MVP, if I remember correctly. Stoned several guys that are highly rated defensive linemen, top 100. Could he slide inside? Yeah, he could. He's 280, something like that. I don't really care about the weight right now. I just like how he's put together. And more importantly, this is the other thing. When a guy does a spin, he doesn't get too far inside, outside, whatever. He stays on his feet, stays up and down. He doesn't lunge. He's not reaching for everything. He is patient. Not many high school linemen are that way. And he waited for the counter move on that spin move and just stoned this guy. It was a pretty good move. If you come out spin right off the bat, most guys aren't going to catch that. Nash saw it coming. I had it right there, right in front of me, and I saw him like, oh, that's impressive. He's a smart kid. He figured this guy out before the play ever started. I don't always get to say something like that in an event for a whole group, let alone for a player. So kudos to him. Secondarily, when he did have to move his feet, if he got a little behind, he had the athleticism to slide left or right and make up for the lost time that he maybe overstepped a little bit in terms of trying to power a guy out and he got underneath him a little bit or something. He could move left or right and reset. That's not easy as well. I think Nash will end up one of the top 5 to 8 tackles in the country. It's a really deep group nationally, by the way. The Northeast, Midwest, whatever, there are plenty of good offensive linemen, but especially down south. And this kid is as good as I've seen this year. Florida State's going to have him on campus at some point, probably. Ziyare was recently on campus, by the way, and he'll probably be back for an official. I think that Nash is one of those wild cards. If he could end up at Florida State with Thomas and or with Ziyare, that's as good a 1-2-3 punch as any school would have in the country. Florida State is in the mix for both those kids, and they already got Thomas in the fold. That would be a tremendous start. Before we go on, I'm going to break down a few other things here on the offensive line, but do note before I get there, we're talking about elite level here. When was the last time, ask yourself this before we go in to the next group of players, when was the last time you felt comfortable saying, as a whole, Florida State had an elite, not a good, an elite offensive line class. Something to think about. Speaking of elite, if you had a free $100, what would you do with it if you were walking around in Las Vegas? Would you bet it all on red? Would you go out to eat? Would you just put it in your pocket and wait for a rainy day? I would look at it this way. I'm probably going to buy a pretty good meal, and I'm probably going to use the rest of the money depending on how my hand goes that night at the blackjack table or something like that. But that's just me. With Gametime, you can download this app and you can find the tickets to events in a place like Vegas. You can get events to NBA games, maybe the NCAA tournament, whatever it is you're looking for, flash deals, last-minute tickets. And the thing that I like best, and I always say this about Gametime, go into the app, you can find whatever school it is you're looking for really quick with a couple of clicks, and then you can see, okay, I want this seat. Where is it? You visually get to see the seat on the screen that you have in front of you. How far am I from the floor? It gives you an idea. That's not easy to do, so it's pretty cool. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Right now, all Gametime users get $100 off the big game ticket with code VEGAS100. That is VEGAS 100. Terms apply. Just download the Gametime app and use code VEGAS100 for $100 off the big game ticket. Lowest prices guaranteed. All right. Now, before I go on, we're talking offensive line here. I just want to reiterate that question I asked a second ago. What year was it that Florida State had a big-time offensive line class? We're talking like top 3, top 4 in the country. That's not normally Florida State's strength, and it's probably their least prominent position in the last 30 years. I'm not sure I know what year. I'd have to research it. Anybody wants to drop me a comment, go ahead and do so. I truly appreciate it, but while they've had guys like Williams, I remember in the late 90s, he was an offensive lineman out of Kissimmee that was big time, went to the NFL. They haven't had a ton of those guys. I'm curious what everybody has to say. Also, make sure you check out Locked On's first ever streaming network on this channel called Locked On Sports Today. It's on YouTube. You can get it anytime, 24/7. And it's also on Amazon Fire TV on the TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for your 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day, local experts on Locked On, and our national shows covering every single week. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So let's get back into the list here a little bit. I want to talk about two different guys that I think are important for Florida State. One time you're going to talk about a tackle or maybe a combo guy or whatever, but every now and then you got to take a pure inside player too that can play guard or center. I've seen him since he was a freshman. His name's Max Buchanan. He's at Seminole High School on the edge of Orlando. That's a prominent program. They've won a state title in recent years. They've consistently produced players that go on to college and the NFL. There's no reason to believe that this won't be another kid that has an opportunity to do the same. So what does Max do best? Just beat people up. Straightforward. Beat people up. He's a physical downhill guy that can do a lot of different things for you. But most importantly, he has the opportunity to do it at two spots, one of which is not going to get as much acclaim, but it's important. That's guard. Florida State could have used some even better guard play last year in some games, especially with the injury bug they had. And they also always looking for a center. Think about Florida State this past year with Mo. When he wasn't in the lineup, it was harder. That's a good football player. You need depth. You need guys always pushing forward to make the depth chart a little bit better. Max Buchanan told me recently at the Under Armour event he's probably going to play center. This is one of the guys that, again, is going to be on campus this spring. I think he's going to take a visit to Florida State 2 or 3 times between now and the time he makes a decision later this summer. Probably going to do his official later in May or early in June. I like Florida State's chances just as much as anybody else. He really doesn't know where he's going. Clemson, UCF, Miami, it's more local. But this is a player that if Florida State's going to climb the hill, get over the top, the climb, all the things you want to talk about, this is the kind of guy you have to get. He's in your backyard. He's competing, or Florida State is competing with all the other schools they go against on the field, like Florida and Miami, etc. You have to win these kind of recruiting battles. And they have something to sell. They're coming off a 13-0 season. For a local kid, this is going to mean a little bit more, in my opinion, and it should. Max Buchanan is the kind of guy that Florida State needs to consistently get. I'd rather sign tackles. The guys that don't end up starting at tackle move to guard. But center's a different deal. And Max is a pretty sharp kid, too. I would trust him making line calls and making the opportunity to double team one guy to root him out and finishing the job. He's the kind of kid that's going to get it done. He's blue collar. I think this is a great opportunity for Florida State. If you can't get those guys in your own backyard, even though I know they're just different competition, you're probably not going to get over the top. If you're going to compete with Georgia, if you're going to compete with Ohio State, you have to win these kind of battles. Finally, one more kid, and that's Josh Petty. He's out of the state of Georgia. He's a unique player. He did not go to Under Armour Atlanta, unfortunately for me. Love his film, though. He's from a smaller school, private institution. Need to see him again at some point, but just from a raw standpoint of can he move? Does he have the frame to weigh 300 pounds, etc.? Josh is that guy. He's not overwhelmingly big. He's 270, 280 right now, and it's a national kind of battle. He's got, schools like North Carolina and Ohio State and etc. that have recruited him, but he still has a lot of offers down south too. Florida State is one of the schools that could end up having him on campus, probably will this spring. And again, FSU needs offensive linemen. If I was to guess, I'd say 4 is the minimum they should take in this class if they can get the right guys. That number is very fluid now with the transfer portal. I get it. But at the same time, if they can get 4 really good high school linemen, you start to mitigate the need to hammer it home in the portal and play Russian roulette. You've got to be able to do that a little bit more. And quite frankly, it's not an easy thing. I get it as well. But if you could get it 1 year, you get that tradition going, you have signed a big class, O-linemen will start rolling in. They don't mind competing with each other. O-linemen tend to go where other really good linemen are. It's always been that way. So with that being stated, Petty doesn't have a list that you're like, okay, this is dead set, or Florida State is the leader, or whatever. He has tons of options, and I'm sure he's got something in his own mind where he leads, but it is what it is. I think Florida State has a chance as well. Playing time is there. He's from Georgia. They recruit Georgia really well. Again, Norvell and his staff have connections all over the South. It's not just Florida. It's not just Memphis. They do a good job of picking out players from all over, and they really did a great job in Georgia last year, actually. This is a kid. Don't be surprised if he ends up at Florida State at the end of the day. I do not care who leads right now anyway with the way things are in recruiting. Let's see if he does take the unofficial visit. He's allegedly going to. And if that happens, this is another opportunity. He's a top 200 kid, conservative, like all the other guys I just mentioned are as well, in my opinion. So before I go into the final group of kids, I want to talk about a couple of receivers just to remind some people of things. Keep in mind that this O-line class can finally get Florida State over the hump. And speaking of that, it's about time because they've always consistently recruited just about every other position at a high level. O-line's been the one for whatever reason. It just hasn't happened that way. Is what it is. All right. FanDuel. Make sure you check out FanDuel because you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team comes home a winner. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Personally, I think quarters and things of that nature with points is pretty interesting as well. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sports partner of the NBA. All right. Now, finally, I just want to reiterate something I went over recently, and that's receiver recruiting. I'm not saying you're going to get all these guys, but there's a couple of interesting trends that I just wanted to finish up with it because it kind of made me say, this is intriguing. When does a kid visit? How often does he visit? And do they visit at the same time as other great players? And finally, in this case, do they visit the exact same weekend? Looks like Florida State's going to have a really big weekend. So coming up, like all these kids I've mentioned are going to be on Florida State's campus probably in March, if not March, early April. The visit dates will change, guys will cancel, whatever. But like they have an opportunity to bring in Winston Watkins, Travis Smith, Caleb Cunningham, Jamie French, a lot of great players, okay? I'm going to go through each one of them. Winston Watkins, originally committed to Colorado. He's a slot receiver. His uncle played in the NFL receiver, played at Clemson. I'm sure you remember him. Great athlete. Might be the best slot in the country. This young man could end up at any school. He's not afraid to leave. He's not afraid of a challenge. Obviously, he was committed to Colorado, and they weren't very good, obviously, but he committed before that season even started. Now that he's backed off of that, free game. He could go anywhere. Florida State's recent history is pretty darn good at receiver. Somebody to keep an eye on. I'm not actually going to see him at IMG Academy here very soon. Travis Smith. Saw him at Under Armour Atlanta. 6'3", 6'4", makes catches like a guy that's 5'9" because he gets open like a 5'9" guy. Twitchy for his size, still uses his length for a back shoulder fade, catching the ball up over a guy or coming back for the ball and using his length to get his hands over a defensive back's head. And finally, he just can snag balls other guys can't because of his length. This is a big dude. Smart kid, really easy going, good student. But on the football field, man, he makes catches all over the place. I thought he was the most consistent receiver that I saw at Under Armour. They were working at both ends. I saw him a little more than some other guys, but still, he was really good. Whether it was accurate or not, Travis went and got it. Whether it was short or not, he went and got it. If it was a bomb, didn't make any difference at all. Love that kid's upside. Auburn, Clemson, Florida State, Georgia, you name it, everybody's involved. Big-time player. The guy that has been around to several schools already, but he doesn't talk a lot. Florida State's probably on the outside looking in, but they're the wild card, is Caleb Cunningham. He's from a smaller school in Mississippi. It's fairly close to Mississippi State. He lives half hour away, something like that. They're the odds-on favorite. And don't laugh at that. Jeff Lebby being there, being a pass game guy, they got shot. Lane Kiffin's all over him too. First day out of the dead period, he's supposed to go there and visit. No idea where this situation is going to go, but Florida State's been in on him, and they've always recruited the Mississippi kids hard. Don't be surprised if he takes a bit. Out of these, the receivers, this is the one that's least likely. But holy cow, is he good. 6'3", 190, can go up like crazy. He has serious athleticism, probably a really good basketball player if I was to guess, and I would imagine he's also a tremendous track athlete too. Finally, I want to talk about one other kid, and somebody I've talked about on this show several times, but it's just never enough. That's Jamie French. He's also coming in on the 23rd. We're talking about him and Cunningham coming the same weekend. They might be the two best receivers in the country. You can certainly make an argument for it. I just think it's interesting. Whenever you got two guys coming in at that level, they're elite, I always find it unique that they do that. Do they know each other? Is there a reason? Or is it just purely coincidence? I honestly don't know. But Florida State's supposed to get them in on March 23rd. So that's a big date for Florida State. There's some other kids coming in. Zaire is supposed to be that weekend. Kylan Deere, a kid out of Mississippi, my favorite running back in the country, is supposed to be at Florida State that weekend. Huge weekend for the Seminoles. So, again, just to reiterate, this could finally be the year that Florida State has a great breakthrough year with offensive line recruiting. And they could also find a way to get over the hump again with receivers. They just lost two great ones. Kind of hard to replace, Johnny and Keon, but they're going to do their best. Getting a couple of these guys I just mentioned would help out a lot. Speaking of helping, I appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to this podcast. Please share it, and above all else, comment whenever you get the opportunity. Everybody have a great day, and thank you much.